Hi, this is Dr. Jordan here today to talk to you about connectors. Now, a connector is an electrical component that links two or more components together. There are a number of major types of connectors, and I'll talk through those in the context of one of the main companies that makes them, which is called Molex. TE Connectivity also makes connectors, and you can also find them through a number of distributors like Newark or DigiKey. Now I'm on Molex's website, and I'll start off, and if I click on products, it'll show me the wide variety of different connectors that are out there. There are thousands of options. In many cases, you can kind of look at it and figure out, okay, is this even what I'm looking for? So like, for instance, antenna connectors, those are for connecting antennas to cell phones and radios and such. They've got fiber optic connectors. In this class, a lot of what you're going to be interested in are these three right here, which are connectors, edge cards, and sockets. In the three categories, there are board-to-board connectors, which allow you to connect two circuit boards together. Wire-to-board connectors, which allow you to connect wires to a circuit board. So for instance, like let's say you have an external sensor and you're trying to connect it to a board. Or wire-to-wire connectors, and those are for things like, let's say you've got a wire harness for batteries and you want to connect it to another wire harness. Then that would be an inline connector. Also of interest for this class are down here, there are power connectors, and those are particularly useful for higher currents. So if you need more than about 4 amps of power at any point in your system, then you'll likely want to use power connectors rather than the smaller connectors that we use for signals. Also of interest would be the modular jacks and plugs, so those are things like phone jacks or Ethernet jacks. And then solderless terminals and terminal blocks and barrier strips. These are things, I'll just quickly go to this page. These are things where it allows you to screw wires directly in. And you'll see them in like security systems and home automation systems sometimes, and also in sprinkler systems. Those are the common places. The downside to this is that you can put the wires anywhere where you want, but you can also put the wires in the wrong places, versus if you use the other types of connectors we're going to look at, you can have them attached in the same place every time. So let's say that we want to find a connector. Let's say we've got an external distance sensor sitting in a robot, and it's mounted to the front of the robot, and we've got a wire coming off of that distance sensor, and that wire needs to connect into our printed circuit board. So I'm going to go to the wire-to-board connectors section here. And that's loading. And you'll see there are a number of different categories of wire-to-board connectors. So there are micro-miniature ones that are really, really small, power ones which handle higher currents, signal ones which are what you'd need just for the normal sensor wires, I/O, and sealed, which are special cases used in particular applications. Now in our case, this sensor is relatively low current. Let's say that it's maybe 100 milliamps at most. So that means it would fall under the signal category. So I'm going to click on signal, and that will take me down to show me many different options. Now, in many cases, probably the most common size for connectors is 2.54 millimeters or 0.1 inches, and that is considered standard spacing for headers and such. And so you'll see here, for instance, this KK254 connector system. That is a very, very standard spacing for connectors. So let's, in the spirit of staying with standard connectors, let's go ahead and click on that. And you'll see here there are different types. So there are headers that you can attach to PCBs. There are crimp housings. There are crimp terminals. There are PCB headers. These are all of the, and PCB receptacles. So these are all of the core parts that you might have in your system. Now, in general, you're going to want to have a header on the board, and those headers have many different features. So let's say that I'm looking at these PCB headers, and this is called a parametric search. So it tells me about all the different options where I can choose, for instance, how many circuits. That is the number of pins that it'll have. So let's say that it's a 4-pin connector. That starts to filter down the number. I might also care about the packaging type, but in this case, so it's a bag or it's a reel. Now, reels are used if you want to do high volume manufacturing. So in our case, bag is probably good enough. Current, so the maximum current per contact, that is important, and it looks like there are the most options for the 4.0 amp, and so that probably means they may be cheaper. So we're going to go ahead and choose that 4.0 amp. And then there are lead-free process. So that is for particular ways of soldering the board. Wave soldering is pretty common, and that means that it's, as you can see there, it's got 20 different options. So that's the reason why, because it's the more common way to solder these days. So that's probably everything we need right here. I mean, you can choose different metal platings and such depending on your application, but for us, we really just need a straightforward connector. And so here, it gives us different options. Some of them have locking tabs on the side to keep things from coming out. Some of them don't. Some of them are right angles, some of them are straight, and some of them, they have various combinations of all of those. So that allows you to choose a connector. Here you can get the full drawing of it, you get the product specification, a 3D model, all the information that you would need about that given connector. So that's a way to choose the connector that attaches to the board. Now, if we want to take, so first of all, this site also lets you order samples, and so there are instructions on the blog on how to fill out a sample request form, and they're very generous with their samples. I highly recommend it. You can also take these part numbers, and so there's the full part number for the device here, and then go search on DigiKey or Mouser, and they will allow you to. They'll show you the entire line of products in here, and you can choose what you want to purchase. So, taking a step back, let's say that we want to choose the other side, which is the connector that will go to the board. So I'm going to go back to the KK254 connector system, and I've got these crimp housings. Now, here, it's relatively straightforward. There aren't nearly as many options. We choose, again, 4 circuits because that's what we had chosen before. You can have a couple different color options. Let's say we want white, and then beyond that, this is pretty much it. So some of them have tabs that will allow you to mate them in particular directions. Some of them will have a tab that keeps it locked in to the connector on the board, and you can choose your part from there. And then again, you have the entire part number that you can either order a sample of or go and order from Mouser or DigiKey. Now, the one important thing to note here is that these housings do not have any metal in them typically, which means that you need to order the pins separately and crimp them on. And so that's why there's this Crimp Terminals section right here. And this is where you'll want to choose based on your wire size. So again, there aren't many options here. You choose based on the gauge of your wire. So let's say that we're doing 22 gauge wire in our device. Then that will point us to all of the different types of pins that will connect. And so a lot of the differences are primarily, is it on a reel for use in a large manufacturing environment, or is it in a bag? And then there are different types of plating on the pins which give you different electrical characteristics. Or for instance, if you're in a marine environment where there's a lot of salt in the air, then you might want to use a particular type of plating on your pins. So you'll need to make sure and buy these pins separately in addition to the housing, and the pins will then be crimped on, and you can get a crimp tool from the shop next to our classroom.